Hi, I'm Alina. I am a professional documentary photographer and filmmaker, and today I'm going to walk you through how I make a seamless slider collage for Instagram. I get a lot of questions about this, especially when I make them for one of the people I work for, the Mandagees. I do these for them a lot, which is how a lot of people have kind of found my work, I guess. So I've been getting a lot of questions from that account, from their account that I help manage. I figured it was time to actually do a visual walkthrough because it makes a lot more sense. I use Adobe Photoshop for this. This is the best tool in my opinion to do this with. You can get apps that'll do it. I personally don't feel like you have as much freedom and flexibility over the finished product doing it that way, and it's just not the easiest way in my opinion to do it. So I will be showing you how to do it in Adobe Photoshop. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is really define what your story is, because there's so much going on. Can sometimes get a little convoluted and just messy looking if you don't know what story you're going to be telling. The slider collages are really awesome if you want to tell a story in a different way than just a normal carousel post. So I've used them before with like showing cabins, like the interior and exterior of cabins, like showing the story of a road trip. You could do it for like different journalism stories. There's a lot of different ways to use it. Today I'm going to be showing you how I created a slider collage for the tattoo shop that my friend owns that I went and shot. So there's going to be a lot of interior shots of the actual space, but then also there's going to be a lot of photos of the artists themselves working. So that's what I'm working with today. The next thing you want to do is set up your image canvas, which is pretty up to you. There's just a couple things to keep in mind when you do this. So first is how long you want it. I personally like to do it in portrait because I find that it takes up the most space on Instagram, and that's just how I like to do it. You can do it in the square, you can do it in landscape, whatever. So for the portrait, you're going to make your height 1920 pixels. For the length, this is all depending on how many individual photos you want to have. So if when you're going on Instagram, you're sliding through and you want to have 3 different sections, you're going to multiply 1080 by 3. If you want to do 5, you're gonna multiply by 5. It's pretty flexible with how many you want to have. You can also change this later if you're kind of going through the project and you're like, oh, I need more or less space. You can change it, but it's pretty simple. You just multiply 1080 by however many little images you want to have. Next, you're going to make your guide layout. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to new guide layout, and you're going to enter the number of images that you want. So if you multiply 1080 by 5, you're going to enter 5. I did 1080 by 3, so I'm going to put in 3. So this is going to show you the actual images that you're going to have when you export, and this is really important to do now so you know where to actually lay the images as you're working through this. The next thing you're going to do is just put your pictures in. You're going to, like I said, kind of pick photos that tell your story. You can pick more and then delete them. You can add them. It's really flexible, and this is just a time for you to really play around with it. The biggest tips that I have for this process is, one, because it's the slider collage, you're going to want to layer the pictures over those guidelines. So when it cuts, it slices the images into sections so it looks seamless as you scroll through it. One of the biggest things to remember when you're making the seamless slider collages is your first image. This is like your establishing shot. It's the first shot you see when you start a movie. This is super important because it is the first thing someone's gonna see. And what I have learned is if you do not have an establishing shot and you just immediately go into kind of that layered look on the first slide, you are not gonna get very high engagement. It also kind of looks messy, in my opinion. I did one collage that didn't have the establishing shot like this, and I hated that collage. So what I like to do is, because it's in portrait, a vertical photo will take up about 2/3 of that first like chunk, and that's beautiful. And then the next like little third will start to incorporate the collage itself. Having that first establishing shot is super important, and I would recommend going back to the original story you wanted to tell and kind of look through your images and decide what do I want to open that story into, what really presents that story, what introduces the subject. really focus on that because that image is super important. It packs like the biggest punch. That's what people are going to see first. And personally, I like to keep textures and patterns and colors that are very similar separate. So really incorporating a lot of different textures and colors into these makes it look so much better. So you can see in this project, we have a lot of that gorgeous mural that Lena hand painted. But because it's like the entirety of one wall, it's in so many of these images. So I made sure that they weren't all up next to each other because then it tends to look really chaotic and cluttered. You also can crop images. So if you double click on an image, you can crop that individual photo, which is really helpful if something just isn't fitting right, you can do that. Don't be afraid to crop outside of the original aspect ratio you had for that image. It can really help give you some, mix it up a little bit, give you some different vibes. Right now is just super personal to your final image, the final product that you want, and also to the images and the story you want to tell, which is why in the beginning, I think it's really important to make clear what story you're telling so you can keep that in mind as you go through. Because if you want it to be more of a chronological story, like for a road trip or a trip in general, you can kind of have that story go through the entirety of the image. So it's important to have that beforehand, and also just so you can pick images based on that. I'm just kind of going through, moving around. This is just something where I will resize and move stuff and just play around until I'm really satisfied with it. Sometimes it'll be like a 5-minute process and I'm like, wow, this just came together really beautifully. And sometimes it'll be like an hour and I'm still not happy. And so usually I just take a step back, add in different pictures, maybe delete some pictures and mess around with it again. Once you have your images where you want them and you feel really good about how the final product looks, we're going to export. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is go to the crop tool, and you're going to right click. You can right click to get to this as well. Or you can press C until you get to the slice tool, and then you're just gonna click that button at the top that says slice from guides. It's super simple, it does it for you. And then you're gonna export. So you're gonna wanna do save for web and just click over to original, and then I personally saved it as a JPEG. I'm not saying that this is the best export settings. This is just what I do. It always looks really good. I've never had any issues with it. So feel free to take it or leave it. And then you just export it to where you want it to go. It will number your images as they're exported. So it'll have like 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on what you name it. Make sure that they're in that order. Just double check, because when you go to send it to your phone, to post it, you want to make sure that it's in the right order, because depending on how many slides you have, it's just very chaotic to look at and you're like, I don't know what order this goes in. I just double check and make sure it's on the right order. And then if you're on a MacBook to an iPhone, you can just airdrop it. That's normally how I do it. Or you can use Dropbox as another great option to get it over to your phone. And that is it. You have a slider collage. It's not anything where I feel like you need a lot of technical knowledge to do it, but it's a really beautiful way to tell stories in a unique way. And art is something where it's like, figure out the rules, learn the rules, and then break them. So I am super curious to see what you guys end up doing with this tutorial. So feel free to tag me on Instagram and I will look at all your beautiful slider collages. If you have any questions about this, feel free to leave a comment below or DM me on Instagram and I will try to help you out as best I can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.